All right. Hey, everybody. We're just going to take a minute while everyone is getting logged in. All right. I see those numbers starting to climb. So we're just going to stall here for a second, as usual, so that people can start getting logged in, get their volume set, and all of that. For those of you who have attended our webinars in the past, welcome back. If you are new, we're glad that you're here. We have kind of a different type of program today, but one we've done a few times before that has been very popular. So this is always a fun format for us to do this Q&A format. Before we get started, I just have a few notes to go over so that everybody knows what to expect for the session. First of all, we are recording today, so if you have to leave at any point during the class, you'll be able to access this on YouTube tomorrow, usually around midday, and we'll be sending out an email tomorrow as well with a link to the recording. A couple of notes for this since it's a Q&A session. As always, if you have questions, send those into the Q&A box on your Zoom menu. I'll be monitoring those for Andy. We also have some kind of general information that we get asked about a lot. So we'll be going through that. So if I'm holding your question, it's because we'll be getting to that, whole category a little bit later. For those of you who are interested in protecting plants that are in containers, which I know most of you are to some degree. This is going to be focused today on protecting the containers themselves. We get a lot of questions because containers are, especially some of them get very pricey. And so we get a lot of questions on how to protect those containers. So I'm actually going to send out a link to my colleague Peg's video. Many of you know Peg, her video on how to insulate the containers that have plants in them. She wraps them in bubble wrap and burlap. She has a little video tutorial that she does. And of course, if you have questions on individual plants, I would encourage you to contact the plant clinic to get some more information on what that specific plant's needs are. Some of them will need to come inside. Some of them can be wrapped. It just varies widely depending on the plant. So that disclaimer aside, I'll get that link out to you all in a minute. That means we're about ready to get started. Final note, almost forgot. Now that we have people attending from outside of the Virginia area, just so that you are aware, this is all based around zone 7. So if you're in a colder region, I'm not sure in terms of containers how or whether that would impact you, but just be aware that this is garden zone 7. And if you're in a warmer region, you may not experience freezing temperatures as much. So just be aware of all of that. All right. Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Last time we did a Q&A class, I know we thought we were going to go for about 30 minutes and ended up having to cut it off at an hour. So we'll see what we end up with this time around. Let me go ahead and get that link out. And why don't you go ahead and kind of tell everybody about your role at the store, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Sure. As Sally already introduced me, my name is Andy. Been with the company since spring of 2015, and I started in the pottery and statuary department. My role's expanded a little bit since then, but I'm still intimately involved with all the containers and work with all 3 of our locations to make sure we've got a really good product for you guys. We're going to be going over overwintering containers, just getting ready for the winter season. I thought I would be festive and put on and also overwinter my head and keep myself warm this winter. Sally, did you want to ask some of these basic questions we went over?
Yeah, I want to get us started because I know we get questions a lot on what containers are the best, like to prevent breakage or things along that lines. So I want to just start by talking to you about what it is when we're talking about overwintering your containers. Why do we do that? What are the things that we're trying to protect our containers from? So what causes containers to break in the first place? So let's just establish that so that people know, why do we have to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So containers are made out of several different materials, ranging from plastic to clay to concrete. And the things that affect our lifespan, our longevity of these containers is going to be Mother Nature generally, and water, and freezing water especially. So as we all know, plants need water to live. Um, and most of us probably also know that water expands when it freezes, and that can cause some serious damage to these beautiful pots. So we want to get as long of a lifespan out of them as possible. And in that same sense, like Sally said, certain plants are going to be hardier in colder weather than others. But when we're protecting these containers, we're also protecting the plants inside them as well. Um, Generally, what we see in in Northern Virginia is that we will get a very up and down weather over the winter. We're going to get rain one day, freeze overnight, maybe melt the next day, and that constant push and pull of temperatures is going to cause that water to freeze and thaw, and that can really do some damage to both our plants and our beautiful containers that are housing them. So is one material better than the rest? Not necessarily. I mean, I've seen very thick concrete containers take winter damage. I've seen thinner clay containers take damage. So for me, I always suggest to my customers, get the container that you want aesthetically. If I want a beautiful container, I don't want to be limited, and I don't think we need to limit ourselves, but we do just then need to follow suit when it comes to our first hard freeze of the year of how do we control that variable. And I'm just going to get into that and speak to that in a couple of ways right off the bat. This right here is just what we call ceramic or clay container that has a glaze that's been fired on it. So clay material with the glaze is pretty much glass. It's a paint that's been heated so until it gets solid, hard in a kiln. With any container, what I like to suggest is using a riser or pot foot, if you will, to elevate this container off the ground. That can both give it a nice ornamental look in the normal season, and then in the winter, it allows water to release from the bottom of the container and out, so it's not sitting in a shallow puddle of water. That is kind of number one when anybody's asking me, how do I get a longer lifespan? I always suggest do yourself a favor and upgrade your container with some pot feet or risers, if you will.
I would say too, for anybody who keeps, and I may be off base for this because I grew up in Florida, and as you know, I live back, many of you know, I live in Florida now. So we keep saucers under our containers year round. But saucers collect water. So I know we usually tell people, I'm assuming you to remove the saucer.
That's correct, and
Flip it. Could you?
that's a great point. Meaning saucers are great to protect your floor from the water, but has the opposite effect in the winter. Meaning it just gives opportunity for a shallow puddle of water to be held in the saucer, freeze, expand, and one hard freeze at night will irreversibly damage a container potentially. So
Okay.
I like to stay away from saucers outdoors in the winter. Um, and generally all my indoor plants at my own residence, I'm absolutely using saucers to protect my floors and my countertops wherever I have all my indoor plants.
Okay. Yeah, I know that's interesting because it sounds to me like the key is always just to keep your pot away. You do not want moisture. When you're talking about pot feet, can you put it on like bricks or cinder block? Is that enough, or can they still collect moisture enough to absorb into the pot and damage it?
So you absolutely could use a brick or a paver that was maybe left over from your house being built. Anything that raises the container that also does not inhibit the drain hole. So I would not put like a brick or paver right over the top of this drain hole. I want water to release and freely be able to move away.
Gotcha.
Um, I think, of course, there's some aesthetic reasons that you might actually purchase a pot foot that was made for it because it's just gonna look better.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's a good starting point. Yeah, because I know I definitely wanted to cover like what is it when we're talking about winter damage, what causes the winter damage in the first place, and ultimately it sounds like it's water generally. Um, are there any other factors that people should be aware of besides water that can cause damage in the winter, or is that pretty much it?
Water's pretty much the number one, or freezing water to be more
Moisture
exacting.
that freezes.
There's always chance in any season for debris to fall. If I had containers underneath a tree and we've had some like derecho winds come through this season where tree limbs were more brittle, were falling. There's really nothing you can do to prevent that unless you have things on your property, an older tree that might be more susceptible to damage that could cause limbs to fall, that you would just vacate that area of anything valuable, whether it's your
Okay.
containers or don't park your car underneath it.
Okay.
But all these things are out of our control. We can't control the weather, but we can just do our best to accommodate what we have in season.
Okay. All right, let's move on. I want to cover this in about two categories. So first is dealing with helping people get their containers in a good spot that they already own. And second is helping people with selecting new containers, what to be aware of if they want, I'll say, the most low maintenance possible container in terms of worrying about it in the winter. So we'll start with ones that are already at people's houses. So we've covered this a little bit already, but I know I see a lot of pictures and hear about people bringing their containers indoors or into a sheltered place. Is that something that you recommend when I know it's not always possible? Like sometimes you have a tree planted in a container, but is that something that you generally recommend, or is it not really necessary?
So that's a really good question. And to answer that, it's a little bit of a case by case scenario, meaning, like you said, you could have a really heavy material, a larger tree in a very large, heavy container. We've got concrete containers that we sell that are well over 200 pounds. And we wouldn't want somebody attempting to move that hurting themselves and or then hurting the container in the move. So certain things just aren't going to be reasonable to move, and so we shouldn't move those things. If something is lightweight, it's mobile, we feel physically capable, sure, we can move it. Where do we move it? How do we move it? I'm going to lightly touch on part of it is going to be what your plant material is. So if we take a plant that is gotten into the fall and it's in cooler weather, and we move it inside into a nice warm 70-degree household, that could have an adverse effect on the plant. You may need a median area, for example, a garage that is not heated. So you go from cold outside to a little bit warmer in the garage, can harden the plant off. And this is more for the plant than the container, but you know, it's all part of the conversation. Then from the garage, after it's been there for, maybe it hardens off for a week in there and gets used to that temperature, and then inside. Once again, that's going to be more relative to what plants you have. But in terms of moving it, I'm really only promoting moving it as if you can physically do that easily. I don't want to see somebody struggle with the container and potentially hurt themselves or the container or the plant.
Okay. We had just had a question come in, and I want to, while we're on this, I want to ask you. I know Peg covers this a lot, and she really likes the Mexican pottery, the Talavera, as do I. She's always very strict, saying this should not stay outside in the winter. Do you think that that should always come inside?
Absolutely, at least in our
Okay.
area. So the pottery that we're talking about is also known as Talavera. It's very colorful pottery that's produced and handmade and hand painted in Mexico. So things that are geographically specific, like the Talavera pottery that gets produced in Mexico, it's produced in a warmer environment, and the producers are used to selling it maybe more in that area, but everybody wants that pottery. So yeah, that specifically is a lighter, more delicate clay. And we would absolutely encourage you not to have that outside in the winter so that you can enjoy it year to year. Absolutely.
Plant things in that where you can bring it in. Are there any other materials like that that really you should plan to bring inside because they're too delicate to handle the weather?
So so it's interesting. I mean, another material that can be a little more fragile is potentially just terracotta clay.
Okay.
Now, with that being said, I've seen both sides of the story. I've had customers that have had terracotta pots outside for 15 years, have never moved them inside, and they're fine. I've also had customers that had terracotta pot at the first winter at Saw. It failed. If we're worried about our containers and we have the ability to safely move them, then go ahead. That's just that's insurance, you know,
Yeah.
that you're going to be able to last a little longer out there. Um, but otherwise, things that are harder to move, I'm going to say, oh, you got to use the pot feeder or riser, get that thing
Gotcha.
lifted up because we don't want you moving it and hurting yourself or the container. But
Yeah.
we want to see that beautiful container year after year after year.
Okay. All right. We have our first question from Bonnie. This is a bummer. Bonnie says, last year I stored a bunch of empty clay and ceramic empty containers in a covered Rubbermaid bin outside. When I opened it in the spring, most were cracked or broken into many pieces. Can you explain there wasn't any water?
Hmm. Um, that's we can only speculate. That's an interesting one. I haven't heard anything quite like that. I mean, in my opinion, if a piece of pottery has not gotten wet and it's outside in a controlled environment like a
Okay. She says a
interior of
lot were
a Rubbermaid
terracotta, by the
container,
way.
there's no reason that should have happened unless you know something physical. Somebody didn't know what was in there, moved it
Yeah.
around, didn't realize. W- Cold temperatures can make things more brittle, but if they're not
Yeah.
moving or jostling around, there should be no reason for that. That's a tricky one. I don't know if I have a very
Yeah,
good
that is odd.
answer.
I'm sorry that happened. That would be
Yeah.
so disappointing. Okay, thank you for that. Um, all right. I just got off a little bit off topic, but that was a good question. Okay, so we talked about the Talavera and the more delicate, the terracotta. All right, and we talked about leaving the pop feet to protect any containers. Do you have any examples with you of pop feet?
I
It's
don't,
fine
and
if you don't. Okay,
we definitely have them here on the
yeah.
property. Unfortunately, I don't have any with me right now.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fine. All righty, let's see here. And I'm just gonna tell everybody because I forgot to say this. We have gone doing these Q&As. Sometimes we've gone for an hour, sometimes it's a half hour. So if you have any questions, chime in. We'll go as long as we have questions. And if we get through this fast, then that's great. You guys have all the information that you need. So all right, let's move on to purchasing some new containers. Let's say I come into the store, I want a container that I do not have to worry about. Um, oh, good one. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna backtrack for a second. This person says if there's condensation forming on sunny days, then if the bins aren't airtight, then there could be moisture getting into into that container. So
Uh,
that could be,
Valid point.
yeah.
Yeah, so if you've created, yeah, exactly, an enclosed container, condensation might not be present when you open, doesn't mean it wasn't there. That's a good point. Whoever brought that up, thank you.
Yeah,
That's
no, that's a
another
really good point. Yeah, because if any
reasonable thought of
condensation is in there, any moisture, then that could have done it.
what was going
Um,
on there. Yeah.
okay. All right. So I come into the store, I'm looking for the most durable, I don't have to mess with it container because I forget to deal with things and I'm the person who would leave a container sitting out in a puddle of water all winter. Um, what should I be looking for that's really your most winter durable pieces? Do you have any recommendations in terms of materials?
Yeah, so in terms of what I'll call winter resistant, nothing is winter proof, but your best bets are going to be things like We've got some high grade plastic containers. There's a couple people making these commercial grade plastics that both are single ply or two walled with an empty airspace, two ply plastics. Plastics are more forgiving in terms of their own flexibility and durability. We can touch on in a little bit how that may affect plant material in there, but in terms of the container side of it, a commercial grade plastic is going to be a wonderful product if you don't want to risk the cracking or breaking that can happen with both clay and concrete. And then on top of that, there are certain producers of clay pottery that are making a more thick, robust clay, so it has a better chance of longevity relative, for example, to terracotta clay is both porous, so it can both take on just moisture in the air and hold moisture inside of it. There are clay containers, and it might be hard to see. This container right here is less than an inch thick. This is still an outdoor rated container, but it is a little thinner than some of the other suppliers. And I'd say about 95% of the containers that we show outside are all rated for outdoors. There's a couple ones I have that have saucer attached, and we've kind of gone over how I'm not a big fan of saucer attached in the winter. It's great for many other reasons, but almost everything we carry is a frost resistant clay by all these producers. And if you're out shopping, you can always look for something that looks thicker. If it is thicker, it should be more durable. Yeah.
Okay. I do have a question here, because I bought sometimes just when I really need to buy something that's budget friendly, I'll get that really thin, inexpensive plastic in that like terracotta color so it blends in. I worry about that, one, from an insulation standpoint, and two, if the weather gets too cold, if it might get brittle and break. Is that an issue with the like super thin kind of plasticky stuff?
It can be with
Okay.
it can be. There are, once again, there is a difference between just like what I'll call plastic and commercial grade plastic.
Yes.
So we carry a plastic container by Crescent Gardens, pardon me. And Crescent Gardens is a commercial grade plastic, and they make it in both single ply forms and two ply. Even the single ply forms of that brand hold up wonderfully in the
Okay.
winter, even with some freezing and pushing and pulling. Like worst case scenario, you would have a lot of moisture get in one, and it might just barely bow out a little bit and not break, not crack. If you go with a very economical single ply plastic, there is possibility of the cold temperatures making it brittle. But we have options on both sides.
Okay, gotcha. And that's just always something that I'd wondered about. If you go for your budget friendly option, if maybe that ends up becoming an issue in really cold weather. My super budget, super friendly budget. Okay, my next question. We did get a question about overwintering calla lilies. So if you guys have questions about plants, let me know and I can try to follow up. I actually have a calla lily and I bring it inside for the winter, and it goes dormant, but I leave it inside. So I would assume in Virginia, maybe same, but check with that. I may not need to bring it in. All right. Next question. Okay, so if you're going to plant like a tree, a small tree, a big shrub, something in a container that you really want to leave outside, what steps do you recommend taking to protect that tree in terms of, should you be buying a pot of a certain size, like larger than the root ball? Do you have any tips to help keep those plants healthy year round?
Sure. So a couple things come to my mind right away is, what kind of potting media are we using in the container for that plant? We want something that will have good drainage and aeration. We don't want water's as we're going to bring up a couple times, water's generally always the issue with freezing and damage. So having a potting soil that has good drainage and aeration and spending just a little extra money on a nicer potting soil is going to allow water to move through that container and out at a better rate and consistency, so that you're not holding on to water that's going to expand and cause damage both to the container and to the plant, the root system. You know, we don't want to freeze the roots in the winter. So first off, let's get a nice, well-draining, aerated potting media. Then in terms of material, well, let's speak to size. So generally when we're sizing a container for a plant, we're going off the diameter of the root ball, of the root system. So if your root ball or root system from the top down, the diameter is 10 inches, we'd like you to put it in something about 2 inches larger than that. If you start, so a 10-inch diameter goes into a 12-inch container. If you say, oh, well, I really want to, you know, not repot it and I just want to put it in a giant container and let it grow into it, that can have a negative effect. You're going to have a lot of soil. It's going to hold on to a lot more moisture, not just bad for freezing, but that can lead to root rot and fungal issues, fungal gnats, and just kind of be a nasty mess, if you will. So having the right size of container is important, both for the container and for the plant. And so we really don't want to go too much larger than the existing root ball. I'd say 2 inches is normally what we recommend. If you went up 3 to 4 inches larger, that would maybe be on the top end of what we'd recommend before it just gets too big. And there's aesthetically pleasing as well. You don't want a container this big with a little plant inside of it. It might just look a little goofy. Unless that's really what you're into, go for it.
Sounds good. All right. Well, that pretty much covers the basics on my end, which is good. We've got plenty of time. If anybody has any questions to send in, that's great. I am going to take a minute, Andy. I want to see if you have any kind of general information you'd like to go over, and I actually want to kind of outline the steps. How Peg, how Peg covers her containers with the burlap and the bubble wrap.
I do.
Okay, so for those of you who asked, I had a question about protecting perennial herbs and a lot of plants that stay outside. I sent a link to Peg's video tutorial. It's like 2.5 minutes, and it shows you Peg being Peg and really being able to make everything look pretty. She's come up with a way that she actually wraps these containers, and it's really cute. So she takes, and it insulates. So she wraps the containers in bubble wrap. Then she takes burlap, wraps burlap around the container to hide the bubble wrap, and then she ties a little ribbon around it. So like I said, there's a little tutorial, and that provides some extra insulation for your perennials and plants that you're leaving outside. Should we water plants that you're overwintering in pots? The answer is yes, correct? Just keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, winter in most places will create a dry environment in the air. And as we sometimes aren't as thoughtful, thinking, oh, winter, we're not kind of thinking about our plants as much. We should, and we absolutely need to supplement watering sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, still time and place, meaning if I see the weather forecast and it says it's going to be -10 tonight, I'm probably not going to get that plant soaking wet right before the freeze. That could cause damage. But yeah, watering in the morning, in the right amounts, with the right weather conditions. Yeah, we definitely need to still monitor watering in the winter, just as important as any time.
And I might actually see because we actually have been working on a winter watering guide, because a lot of the winter damage that comes into plants is from the plants drying out. They need more water. So if that is done, I will check with the team. When I send out our email tomorrow, I will include Peg's container tutorial for wrapping the containers, and I will include our winter watering guide, because that is one of the key ways to protect the plants that you have. Okay, next question from John. I have a large container with a mum in it. I want to remove the mum and just put a trash bag over the container. Is that okay? Would a trash bag, if you just covered it, would that be adequate protection for the container?
So if we're gonna pull the mum out, I guess my question might be, are you planning on keeping the potting mix that's the leftover potting media that's in there? I mean, that could hold on to a little bit of moisture, but with the whole mum and root system out, that should still probably be acceptable. But when we put a garbage bag over something, what we have to imagine, and let's see if I can, this is burlap, we're gonna pretend it's a garbage bag. If we put a bag over something and it snows, that snow could potentially
Oh,
cause this to happen. And then you've got a garbage bag that's lining the container, but it could still then absolutely fill with water because a
and then
garbage
if
bag
it freezes,
is, yeah, it could hold water, freeze
yeah,
and cause damage.
okay.
So you still may want to put something in here as a skeleton, like a, for example, if it was this container, if I put a empty 2 liter bottle of soda, I'm just spitballing here, but if I put an empty soda container in here, then when I put my garbage bag over, it's held up and the water can't bend the bag down in there, just creating pooling of water. So
Okay.
can you use a garbage bag? Yes. Will it work? Only if you are looking at it the right way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't have even thought of that. So as long as you can keep the water flowing off the top of the garbage bag, then it's protected. But as soon as the water gets into the container, then it's freezing it from the inside.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just going to
Okay.
kind of elaborate a little bit. You know, I also do all the water fountains here. And as you can just about imagine, it's very important to winterize our water fountains, just like we want to keep our containers nice all winter. A water fountain is going to be that much more susceptible. So in terms of water fountains, yeah, we absolutely pull the drain plugs, let all the water release out. And then we have waterproof fountain covers that can get pulled over that fountain. But occasionally we still need to create some sort of skeleton within any depression to create a foundation so that that container can't just flop down in there and be ineffective.
That makes sense. And another suggestion, I think this would work, but you can make sure that it would, because I wouldn't have thought of the water going into the garbage bag in the container. With no potting material in the container, if there's no potting material in it, then you can turn the pot upside down and cover it.
Sure.
That sounds like that would work. You'd probably still need to make sure it's not on the ground or
Um,
that it's covered completely by the garbage bag.
right. And then surface dependent, meaning like if I flip a container upside down carefully and set it down carefully so I don't damage this top edge, if you will. Um, if I'm sitting on a flat surface, which I think you guys can see here, water still has a chance of being on that flat surface, but a decking, for example, that has slats where there's room for water to escape, or a well-drained area like potentially mulch or gravel could have a place for the water to run to. Once again, we just want to avoid this sitting in a shallow pool of water. So if we feel strongly about that, having this upside down is a nice way to create that canopy for a cover to keep it safe.
Okay. All right. We just had a question about containers that have bulbs in them where they're leaving the bulbs in for the winter and then they'll grow in the spring. So I have the first part I'm going to say, we just had Peg Beer on to talk about bulbs a couple of weeks ago. She is fantastic for all things bulbs. So if you want some advice on the bulbs, send me a note and I'll connect you with Peg. I would assume if you have your containers out with your bulbs in them over the winter, like outside, it would be the same rule. Elevate them, make sure that there's no moisture being absorbed into the pot. Is that accurate?
Yeah, as far as I know, and I think
Yeah.
anything more than that, yeah, I would just direct to Peg regarding
Yeah,
that.
I think Peg puts them in growers pots. She grows all kinds of bulbs. So definitely contact me about that. Um, Okay, let's see. I think this one's for me. I'd like the video on over. Okay, yes. I'm not always getting. Okay, guys, if you're not getting the follow-up emails, please send me a note. We use Eventbrite right now. And we've had a few people that aren't getting the emails. Somehow it's getting marked as spam. So just contact me and I'll see what we can do for you. But I will always, always, always be very happy to personally send you any documents or videos that you want to receive. So just let me know. And I'm going to send my email address out in the chat right now. If the chat, there's the chat box, to everyone so that you have it. And I will always be happy to send you materials. Okay, here's our next question from Mike. When must I start the protecting? We've had frosts, but not a hard freeze. Can it wait until we have a hard freeze? Or I guess before.
Generally, yes. As we all know, Mother Nature is can be chaotic, so nothing is guaranteed. If you it's kind of the scales of, okay, if I winterize something, I might lose a little bit of that beauty of my property because I've now covered my beautiful container and kind of put the plants to sleep for the winter, if you will. But if I don't and I keep them out, am I risking damage or losing that plant? To a certain degree, sure. But I still think, yeah, the hard freeze is the term I use. Yeah, I mean, I'm always watching the weather. We're looking at the weather every single morning, every single evening to see, is precipitation coming? Is that cold drop going to happen? I think so far here in Northern Virginia, we've already had one night where it dipped below 32. I think it was like high 20s, low 30s. Technically we had some freeze there. So on the property here, and I think I'll touch on it just a little bit too, is we have some self-watering containers that are an outdoor container that actually hold water. I upended, if you will, all of those. So the water came out. All of the bird baths, which I wanted to bring up. I also winterize the bird baths, which is as simple as taking that top saucer of the bird bath off and either inverting it upside down, creating like an umbrella canopy so that water can't collect into it, or gently putting it on its side and tipping it against its base or pedestal. And I did that the day or two before I knew we were going to see freezing temperatures, even though it was only 30 degrees, just because I wanted to err on the side of keeping all these beautiful bird bathing containers in perfect condition. So it's really kind of up to you what you're willing to risk, if you will, because it's nice having a beautiful container out with plants to enjoy, especially in the winter when it can be a little bleaker anyways.
Yeah, I want to have all that for as long as possible.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from John. What does footing for the pots look like? I know it varies. Okay, draw a picture. That'll work. I know that.
We'll see.
Okay. I know there's some different styles. So if I have seen correctly, I know we sell them in our store, and but they all kind of have that same look, which hey, you're pretty good.
Can you you can see?
I
Okay.
can see, yeah, I can see.
I do pretty good at what's the game you play when you draw not charades, but
Pictionary.
Pictionary, thank you. So this is let's see how that is kind of a three-dimensional rendering of a pot foot. So for a round container, you would purchase 3 of those and put them at thirds. So this would sit,
very nice. That's a good illustration. Yeah.
And those would go around. And so this would be floating in the air like this. Now, with that being said, what I rendered for you is a pretty standard shape of a pot foot, but they also make them in just like a flat wedge, like a tiny slice of pizza, or even a square that you can actually put all the way underneath. So nothing comes out. So it's almost hidden and really just floating. So you can either have an ornamental foot or a riser that's underneath. Some people put a brick here and a brick here and let it sit that way. I'm more of a fan of something a little prettier, but whatever you're comfortable with.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's yes. All right, yeah, and just a reminder, we do sell those at our store, so you can come in and ask for them. And if you need help, then we can help you find them. So
And yeah, on the pot feet, they come in a glazed ceramic in different colors. They come in plastic, they come in foam, they come in concrete. So if you have a ceramic blue container, there's a really good chance you're going to find a blue ceramic pot foot. So it's cohesive, and you don't have like a red container with a plastic green thing that looks unsightly. We'll have something that should look right for the container.
that's good. Yeah, I would love to achieve that look in my garden. All right. Well, okay, it looks like we are out of questions for now. So it sounds like we're about ready to start wrapping up. If anybody thinks of any questions later. Oh, the roller. Oh, yes, I forgot about that. Here's a question from Tina. The roller casters, like the ones where you have the caster tray, the trays on a
Caster systems, yeah.
yes, that. Does that work just as well?
So, yeah, and I on my little notes here, I do have wheel systems as a point here. So, caster systems or wheeled systems are made in a couple different ways. You can envision a saucer, if you will, that would absolutely hold water and have wheels underneath it. That's one way. And then we're going to go right back to thinking, okay, we don't want saucers outside in the winter. So for those, not necessarily suggesting those for the winter, but then there are wheeled caster systems that are on a that aren't on a saucer, that are on a plastic
I have one that's
component.
just like a wire, kind of wired thing.
Yeah, so yeah, they make them both where it's like draining and it's not acting as a saucer, and also the saucered systems. So the caster systems that are not saucered work awesome. You can wheel that thing around, wheel it from your patio into your garage. If you need help moving it, that's a great way to have something a little bit more mobile. Some of them have wheel locks, so that if you want the wheels underneath there indefinitely, you can put your little wheel lock on so you don't see your container rolling down the driveway away from you. But yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the wheeled systems for both mobility, and having an elevation, if you will. And then the wheeled saucer systems I like for indoor. Maybe I'm getting lots of sun, or maybe I've done a new window dressing inside. I'm like, okay, this plant was happy here, but I my couch is there now, so I move it around. So yeah, those things are great.
I have one for inside for, I have a begonia, one of the polka dot begonias that's like 6 feet tall now. So I have it on casters. It's a little bit out of control, but the casters help. All right. Okay. So now I think we're done with questions. All right. So everybody, if you think of anything else, please do feel free to send us an email. I will follow up tomorrow with the link to Peg's video. I'm going to see if I have that winter watering guide. And if you guys have any questions, please let us know. Andy, is there anything that you want to wrap up with before we close?
The last little bit is, Sally mentioned earlier about Peggy's bubble wrap with burlap. And you said you're going to include the link on that, or that's
yeah, to the tutorial. She does
So-
one. She has one for us.
So take a look at that. It's valuable. It's talking about making basically air insulation with bubble wrap, both to protect the container, but really to help that root system get through the winter. And then burlap around it, which is both utilitarian, functional, if you will. It holds the bubble wrap, but also gives it an aesthetic and a look. The other thing that I've done is I will buy several bags of mulch.
Oh, yes.
I will not open those bags of mulch. I will buy them in the winter or in the late fall, and I will hug the container with those bags of mulch. Doesn't look very nice, but it's effective. It
Utilitarian.
insulates. And then when spring comes around, I've got a couple bags of mulch I can cut open, pour around my ornamental trees on the property. and make use of it. You know, no waste. It's just a great way to both get some winter action and then mulch in the spring. It's another great way to just help insulate those containers. Other than that, um, there's things that we sell called frost blankets. Those are more for plants than they are for a container. So I don't want somebody confused thinking they're buying a blanket for their container. Just look at the material, ask us if you're in store. We're more than happy to explain. Oh no, you can wrap the canopy of your tree with this for a hard frost and things like that. But pardon me, we've got we've got some great material to winterize your containers. I know we didn't speak too much to it, but we have some fountain covers here as well, along with a bunch more that I really hope are getting delivered to us this week, is what I was told. And also for chimeneas, which are a clay container that you can make small fires in. Another great thing to winterize in the winter, and we have chimenea covers as well. But that pretty much wraps it up. Just glad that everybody tuned in and put up with me in my cheetah hat.
I like the cheetah hat. It's a very unique Santa hat. I'm not sure I've seen one like that before.
Santa's got to be quick to get to all those kids' houses.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Andy. Everybody, thank you. We'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow, and please let us know if you come up with any questions as you're getting your garden ready for the winter. Have a good day. And a
Thanks,
good.
everybody. Thanks, Sally.
All right. Bye.